If you're ready to take your destiny into your own hands, you've come to the right place. This is The Bulletproof Entrepreneur, featuring interviews with the most exciting and amazing entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Chi Odogu.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the show today. If you love what you hear on today's episode of the podcast, go to iTunes and leave a review and a comment. It helps other great listeners like yourself find the show. And of course, you can always find more episodes of the Bulletproof Entrepreneur Podcast at www.odogwu.com. And without further ado, on with the show. Hey everyone, welcome to the show. My guest today is Kathy Knowles. Kathy is a speaker, trainer, and consultant who speaks on the 7-step system for creating more purpose, profit, and possibilities. She works with entrepreneurs, small business owners to hire right the first time and have more loyal and dedicated employees and customers. Ultimately, Kathy's clients make the leap out of the day-to-day and go on to playing a much bigger playing field so they can do the work that's in their heart and leave their legacy. I'm pleased to have Kathy to talk to us a little bit about her 7-step system, her background, her business. She's also an author, so she's in the process of writing a new book. So she'll tell us a little bit about all that. But without further ado, Kathy, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here today and talk to you and everyone else. It's exciting. Thank you.
Great. So, Kathy, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, it's interesting. I kind of fell into human resources. It certainly wasn't my plan when I was going to school, going to college. And I've just sort of always had a really strong foundation when it came to people and working with people and things along that line. So it matched me well. So I have over 25 years HR experience in corporations. And you know how it is. Those last few years, I kind of started to say, oh, I'm bored. I don't feel as if I'm being creative enough. I really need a change. And so in 2014, I ended up leaving corporate and starting my own consulting business.
Now, I know while you were working, you were starting your consulting business on the side, kind of like most entrepreneurs do. You started it off as a side hustle, and then you now grew it to the point where, okay, it's viable enough for you to step off and leave corporate completely. So tell us a little bit about, going through that side hustle process of figuring out if it was going to be a viable business to take care of your needs and your family's needs, because I know that was one of the main concerns you had.
Oh, absolutely. I actually at that point in time was the breadwinner in the family. So really stepping back and laying out the foundation. So when I started my business on the side, one of the first things I did, because I had that, quote unquote paycheck coming in, right? So one of the first things I did was make the big investments as far as, making sure all of the office products were in place, as far as the printers and the scanners and the laptops and all of that type of thing. So all of those expenditures I went ahead and made. And then what I was doing as well is making the website, getting my federal tax ID number, again, sort of spending all that money, right, to ensure all of that investment was out of the way. And then I started to build a tribe. I was going out into the world and starting to talk to people and really finding my own voice. And it was probably one of the best things I did because of the fact that my voice has changed so much over the last 6 or 7 years since I've had my business. So it really gave me the confidence to sit down and say, okay, if I'm bringing in this much a month, then what is it going to look like when I step away? And I had a real clear picture of that before I made the decision to leave.
Wow, that's great. You took a less risk. So people always say entrepreneurship is very risky, but you approached it the smart way, which was you mitigated all the risk up front. You use the money coming in from your paycheck to set up the tax ID number, buy all the equipment you need, and then you started putting your name and putting yourself out there to start seeing if what you were going to do was going to be something that the marketplace wanted before you now decided to take the plunge 100%. I love that.
Yeah.
So you said something here that your voice changed over time. So one thing as entrepreneurs is that, when you're trying to start a business, and especially when it's dependent on you, you're the person making the sausage and you are the sausage. So what was your voice at the beginning, and then when you were interacting with people, how did you realize that you needed to adjust and switch in order to meet what people were telling you they wanted?
Oh, this is so crazy for me to even admit, but well, for you. I now business getting so burnt out with human resources and corporate and business and all of that I said, no, I want this game, empowering people, empowering. That's really the way my business is, more of an empowerment type thing, where people were more or less going inside of themselves to find their own inner guidance, to find their own answers, to step away from kind of like all that drama and dogma, so they could find that stillness within and then step forward and create what it was they wanted to create. Mm-hmm. So last year, I was doing a women's retreat in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and amazing women, all a part of my tribe, some new to my tribe, some had been in my tribe a long time. And I just found myself, because so many of them were saying to me that most of my tribe, empowering women at that point, had businesses anyway. So many of them were saying, oh, Kathy, man, I hired this person. It wasn't the right hire. I'm afraid to let him go. I'm afraid of lawsuits. I'm afraid. So I found that I was doing a lot of the business stuff for them. So in Santa Fe, it was a whole women's empowerment retreat. And I was standing in front of the room thinking, I want to help them with their businesses. Like, I want to get out the stickies and everything else, and I want to start mind mapping, and I want to start doing all of this. So that's when it was really clear to me. And I came home and immediately started telling all of my tribe and building this so that I'm back in now kind of that HR realm.
And
I missed it.
Yeah, you missed it, but you were able to course correct because the market was telling you exactly what they wanted, and you obviously had that skill set. Because a lot of times when we want to start something, we feel, okay, we're going to start a business, we'll start in a different line, and not many people sit down and realize that, you know what, I've been doing this for 20, 30 years. I'm pretty good at this, Why don't I apply what I've been doing in corporate to people outside and do this for myself rather than doing it for the company and then get a paycheck? So
and so it's no wonder, right, that these women that own their own businesses were just naturally coming to me to say, hey, Kathy, this is going on, that's going on. What do you think? Because it's part of my DNA.
Yeah. And I know the biggest thing they were telling you about was, and you talk about it a lot, which is hiring right. So let's talk about hiring right, because the main thing in business is relationships, and that's relationship with people that work with you and work for you. So what does it take to make the right hiring decision?
Well, I think there's about 5 places where businesses can really go wrong, shall you say, in the hiring process. And probably the biggest challenge a business has is really being clear. I mean, being clear in 2 ways. Number one, being clear on the vision of where you want your company to go in a year or 3 years, and hiring for that. It's like, we're not really hiring. We are hiring for our needs right now, but we also have to have that ability, right, to hire for the future. And so that's number one. And a lot of times too, people will come to me and say, oh, Kathy, I'm so busy, I just need an assistant. Well, is that really what you need? So it's stepping back to really get clear on what position is it you need, and what will their day-to-day responsibilities be. Because if the CEO is not clear on that, whoever they hire will not really ever be clear on their role either.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. But the next thing to that is that when people hire, there are two ways to look at a hiring decision. You either look for a cultural fit or a credential or a skill fit. Now, the problem lies in when you hire somebody that has the right credentials and the right skills, but does not fit in the culture. So that causes a lot of grief and a lot of stress for so many people. It will cause grief for the person that's hired, as well as grief for the people working with that person and their manager. So how do we deal with that, especially in an entrepreneurial or small business situation where you have 3 to 5 people working together, and those things are going to actually hinder the way you do business?
Right. To me, I love the fact that you asked that question, because for me, cultural fit is more important than skill set. And, sometimes a position may be available for a month, 2 months, 3 months while you're waiting for that perfect mix of both, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's one of those things where I really believe in culture-oriented questions. I believe that every interview should have anywhere from 5 to 7 questions that deal with nothing but the culture of your business, looking for those attitudes. Because one of the things I've learned is people really don't get terminated because they can't do the job. They are terminated or let go because they don't have the soft skills. Or the attitude or the behaviors. So those behavior-based questions are some of the most important questions you can ask.
Okay. So give us an example of what are some of those behavioral questions. Because when I think of culture, I know culture is very broad, but I'm thinking of culture in a way like, okay, we're all extroverts, we're all the boisterous type A personalities. We want to hire other type A personalities to work with us to get things going.
Right. Yes. Yeah, and that's kind of the challenge, right?
Yeah.
It's like, because we can't hire everyone like us.
Yeah.
Because we really need that team. So my first suggestion would be to really, first of all, I say this all the time, the interview is not really a conversation. Now, you don't want it to feel like an interrogation, but it's not a conversation. It really is an interview. So we must start by asking open-ended questions. So that would be something like, tell me a time when, or what did you do when, or describe a failure. Tell me about a project, or how do you? Like, those are really good open-ended questions, because it prompts the candidate, the applicant, to tell a story more or less about their lives. And the beautiful thing about that is you can find out a lot about them, their attitude, their behaviors through that story, but you can also tell a lot about their skill set. So for instance, like a really good question would be, if we were sitting here a year from now, celebrating what a great year it's been for you in this role, what did we achieve together? Because with that question, you're going to get an idea about a lot of things. Number one, you'll again understand their attitude, behavior. You'll understand their drive. You'll understand their confidence. You'll also know and be able to tell from that one question how detail oriented they are. It's a very interesting question. Yeah,
I can see that.
Question. And then another question I think that's really important to ask, which will tell you a lot about their culture too, which this sort of seems like it doesn't work, but it's very important. What's the highest dollar amount that you've earned over the last year? And do you feel that's fair?
Wait, I don't get that. So what's the highest dollar amount you've earned, and do you feel that's fair? And that's you're asking the candidate?
Yes, you're asking the candidate. And you're asking...
Okay, go on.
Yeah, you're asking for a few reasons. Okay. Number one, you want to know if that dollar amount that they say to you is within the budget that you're willing to pay, even though within your job posting and all that, you may have already said something, but you just want to know. And then two, do they think that's a fair amount? And that is probably more important than the first part of the question, because everything about business has to do with money, right?
Yeah.
We're all in business to make money.
Yeah.
So there needs to be that more or less openness or the feel for the applicant or candidate to be able to talk about money. And it starts with them talking about their own money. And, if they don't think they were being paid fairly, that's a fine answer. They can answer it that way and say why.
Yeah.
If they do feel they were being paid fairly, that's a great answer too. But it really is kind of like one of those really big eye-opener questions.
Yeah. Now, what about on the other side, the side of the applicant too? What are some great questions to ask a hiring manager to determine if you're a good fit with that company? Because sometimes I know people just want to get a job and work, but at the same time, it's good to be smart and strategic about where you're interviewing so that you'll know that you're going into a place that you will not be stressed at, that you will enjoy, and that you feel that you have something vested for a certain period of time, whether it's 3 years or 5 years, before you decide to take the next step.
Yes. I think, number one, I think that doing research on the organization is really important. So going out, finding out what you can about the company and their services. And while you're doing that research, if there's anything there that triggers you, while you're out there, it's like, oh, if you find you're curious about something, dig a little bit deeper into that. But, some of the questions that I would ask too is, where does your organization plan on being a year from now? And how do you plan on doing that growth? And then I would ask about their customers too, because a really neat thing is, team members or employees, they're your biggest customer advocates. Yeah. They're the ones that are out with the customers every day. So what is their ideal client? What does their ideal business look like? Who are, if they don't mind telling you, some of their biggest customers? Because that'll give you a feel too of branching out from where the business is, branching out into the community, who they are. What is your reputation? Those are really important questions to ask because it's about your career.
Yeah, that's true. And so your 7-step system, where does that play in this when you're talking to a particular client who's dealing with these type of human resources issues?
Yeah, the 7-step system really came about when I started doing a lot of my empowerment work, right? Because I was talking to these and working with these business owners who were really just feeling completely depleted. Like, what did I start a business for? I feel like I'm an employee in my own business. I didn't think it was going to look this way. And so with the 7-step system, step 1 is really strategizing your journey. And that is really getting clear on where you want to be 1 year from now and where you currently are. So it's kind of reverse engineering, right? Here's my inventory today. This is where I want to be in 1 year. Let's reverse engineer it and let's start working to get there. I think too, a lot of times business owners, just as you said earlier, we don't take enough time to really recognize our own strengths. It's kind of a subconscious thing. Yeah. But yet when we hire people, we very much hire people that are just like us, which that's not what we need.
Yeah.
So when we can get really clear on what our strengths are, quite frankly, as well as our weaknesses, then we can go into the next step of saying, okay, so if this is my weakness, let's start hiring for these different skill sets.
I love that. So basically you want to build out your team based on your strengths and your weaknesses, so that in as much as you're strong in one area, you want to have somebody else that can help you in areas where you're weak, so that you have a more balanced team, a more balanced organization, and then you're able to grow and expand and dominate your markets.
Yeah. I mean, it's a real challenge if you have a whole organization worth of extroverts that are really love people and all of that, if you don't have any more of the introverted type role, because those are some of the people that are in your account, that handle your accounting, that handle your creative work possibly. It's that real high detail oriented, I'm going to sit here at my desk and I'm going to do this, and it's going to turn out beautiful.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
going from that, it just I did some research on you, and I remember something you said somewhere was that one of the most difficult times in your business career, early in your business career, was when you partnered with someone who was a
Oh.
client initially, who ended up becoming a business partner, but that partnership, that relationship didn't really work out for the best, and then you learned a lot about interviewing. So tell us a little bit about that experience, what you learned from that situation, and then how you now use those lessons to help your clients going forward.
Yeah, I love that question, and you definitely did research on me. I So that is exactly what happened. This is when I was still working in corporate. I had a client. She owned her own business. She lived in another state. She was very extroverted, very much like me, driven. And so I left corporate, and I had been out of corporate for about a year, and she was really, trying to get me to come on board with her. So I was on board for about 3 months and quickly realized that this is just not going to work out. Not her fault, not my fault, just not going to work out.
Yeah.
And I stepped away. And I think part of it for me, it was slowing down on my bright, shiny object syndrome. I have a tendency to have that, where, oh, look at that. That's awesome. Let's try that. Oh, look at that. That's awesome. Let's try that. And so this really allowed me to step back and say, I knew it wasn't going to work when I stepped into it. So why did I say yes? Number one. And I really started reflecting on myself more. And so in many ways, it's taught me to say no much more often. I say no to things now more than I ever have. And it's also required me to step back and say, will our personalities really work out in this? Because again, right, it's two people that were very much the same saying yes to move forward to do something.
Yeah.
Well, where's the rest of the team?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, really a challenge.
And I think that could also be extended to every other partnership. So when you talk of marriage, or you talk of not just business partnership, but even friendship, because you find that sometimes if you're getting to take, for example, like a personal relationship or a marriage, you don't want to make a decision based on something that's on the surface. You want to actually learn as much of that person as possible before you now decide that, okay, is this something I want to commit to for the long haul or not? So that's a very good lesson that you learned in business, and I'm sure you translated that to other areas of your life. So one other thing I want to ask you as we start to wind down the show is that many companies have a deficiency when it comes to communication. You can see from the news media, places like Uber, Equifax, even Wells Fargo, and was it United recently that dragged the guy off the plane?
Yeah.
United, yeah. So they all have communication problems, and that, I think, is one of the biggest things that is really essential for somebody going into the workplace. So tell us a little bit about how companies, managers, directors, and even people starting out their careers or mid-level in their careers can start developing better communication skills that will help them thrive in their careers as well as in the marketplace.
I love that question, because in my work that I do, communication is communication is the most important piece. We see it in all of our world today, the lack of communication or misunderstanding and everyone having their own perspectives. And I think number one is to be open-minded in communication, to really listen to what people are asking or what they are saying. I think it's really important to read between the lines. A lot of times it's not even about what a person is saying, it's what's in that gap. And two, to understand that if we are being criticized in some way, not necessarily the negative way, right? Like, oh, you're just stupid. I don't mean it like that. But if someone is sitting down to truly take the time to talk to you about a space where you're deficient in something, that type of criticism, it means they care enough about you to give it to you in the first place.
Yeah.
Now, in communication, there needs to be more kindness, more humility, and just more space for true listening.
So basically, listening is the most powerful thing in communication. That's the way to actually thrive and to get things going, by being better listeners.
I think so.
Why is it so difficult, though? You know?
I think that that's such a great question. I'm sitting here mulling that over. I may have to listen to that question again.
Why is it so difficult? We all have that problem.
Yeah, one of the things that's said out there, and I could be wrong on the percentage, so if I am, I'm going to apologize in advance, but I think I read somewhere that we hear 85 or 90% of what we say and only about 15% of what someone else says.
So basically, we're not even listening to what the other person is saying. We're anticipating what they're saying in order just to respond.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's such a great question. I love that. Wow. That would be a good blog, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would. Just listen, and you can take it, and you can run with it. You can do it.
Thank you.
Cool. So as we start to wind down the show, Kathy, I have just one or two wrapping up questions for you. I know you spent a long time in corporate, and now you've been running your business for almost 8 years or so. So looking back on your career thus far, is there anything you think you would go back and change, knowing what you know now?
I would have stepped out on my own to be an entrepreneur sooner. And I would have also, one of the biggest mistakes I made when I first went into entrepreneurship was staying in my office and working. And I'm sure you probably hear that all the time, right? I wasn't getting out in the world enough.
Yeah.
And so I think both of those two things I would have definitely changed.
And my last question of the day, for younger people that are starting out their careers or still very early in their careers, they're unsure of, what to do in terms of a career path, whether A, where they're working is where they're going to stay for the next 3 years, 5 years, or B, they may be credentialed, they may be working somewhere, but they just feel that they don't have that passion in what they're doing right now, and they just feel that urge, that itch that you had to try something different. What would you advise the two categories of people?
I would say, number one, to follow your gift. Because if you have something that you're naturally good at, that's the direction that you will go anyway. I think at the beginning of this interview, I had said I've always had a gift with people, but I certainly wasn't planning on being in HR. But I was very blessed because that was my gift. That's where I ended up. And I think, too, another really important thing is to don't be afraid to take the leap into the unknown of something you think you can't do. Because if you believe your gift is there, you can do it, and it's going to shine through.
Love it. And with that said, we've reached the end of the show. I really want to thank you for coming to share your words of wisdom, Kathy. But before I let you go, where can people find you, interact with you, learn more about you and your company, Intuitive Strategies?
Absolutely. My website is actually intuitivestrategies.com. And through there, you can find out a whole lot about me. And I would love for you to message me through there. Of course, I always answer all of those. You could also find me on LinkedIn under Kathy Knowles, Knowles. My Facebook is under Kathy Knowles Intuitive Strategies, as well as Twitter. You can find me, Kathy Knowles, there as well.
Right, and I'll link to all that in the show notes. And one more thing before I let you go. Sorry, I do that.
No problem.
And one more thing. I know. Tell us a little bit about the book you're writing, and what's the topic, and when can we expect that out in the market?
Well, it's kind of silly because I don't even have the title yet, but the book's definitely coming together. And it is a fable about a hiring manager who is just really struggling with hiring within this business that is definitely service-based and pretty heart-driven. They come from a place of high integrity when it comes to their clients and customers. So it is definitely a fable about a struggling HR person trying to hire right the first time.
Wow.
Yeah.
And any idea where you think you will be done so that we can check it out? Or we'll just come and check your website and then we'll find out when the book will be out.
Yep, I'm really hoping for the first quarter of next year. That's what we're working on.
All right, great. And I'll hit you up again. I'll find out when it's ready, and then I can.
That sounds wonderful.
Okay. So, Kathy, thanks a lot for coming on the show to do the program. I really appreciate you spending the time with us to share your story, your words of wisdom, and just give us a little bit of advice on how to take our careers to the next level.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening to. Thank you for your time.
Great.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning into the show today. If you love what you hear on today's episode of the podcast, go to iTunes and leave a review and a comment. It helps other great listeners like yourself find the show. And of course, you can always find more episodes of the Bulletproof Entrepreneur Podcast at www.odogwu.com.